West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
I wonder what you make of what we're learning from this 51-page report from the Select Committee.
Well, hi, Nicole. Thanks for having me on. I mean, it's shocking, but it also shouldn't be shocking because this is exactly what we've been hearing, exactly what we've been seeing, frankly, exactly what we've known since January 6th, that Donald Trump and his enablers attempted to overthrow an election and stop our democratic process, period. The fact that there's a PowerPoint and documents that have been circulated that they actually took this plan, this insurrection, this coup plan, and put it into a PowerPoint presentation. We're trying to solicit support for it using these documents. Surely is shocking, but this is a continued effort. This is not over. We're not talking about history here. This outlines a lot of the same things that Donald Trump and his supporters continue to try to do to undermine our democracy. And of course, they do use folks like Michael Flynn and Mr. Waldron and others, people that have held positions of public trust in our military to try to advance those plans.
Well, and I think they use those people because those are people who traditionally in normal times have more credibility in our society. They connote responsibility and trust. But this time, the people they were targeting were other Americans. The target was the will of every American who hadn't voted for Donald Trump. And I wonder how you feel personally. I have some numbers. 12% of Capitol riot cases have military experience, 72 veterans, 2 National Guard, 4 Reserve, 1 active duty, 1 who was attending basic training. Should we be surprised? Are you surprised that so many military and ex-military were involved in that effort to overthrow our own country, our own democracy?
I am surprised, Nicole, and I feel awful about it, to be honest with you. As you might recall, I was one of those members who was trapped in the House gallery on January 6th for some time, surrounded by that riotous mob, by those insurrectionists. And I've struggled a lot over the past year almost, thinking about this idea that I was on one side of that door, and on the other side of that barricaded door were other veterans, people that took that same oath, that committed to protect the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And yet there they were trying to overturn the election, trying to kill members of Congress, fellow veterans who had also taken that oath. How did we get here as a country? What I've asked myself. How did we get so far down this path? The vitriol, the toxicity, the danger that Donald Trump and his enablers have created for this country is something that I struggle with. But at the same time, I draw some inspiration from the fact that there were a lot of people who didn't do this. You think about the military, undoubtedly, 1 veteran or 1 active duty military officer participating in this is too many. But the vast, vast majority of our men and women in the military are some of the most patriotic, humble public servants you will ever meet. Let's also not forget that day on January 6th, were thousands of Capitol police officers, Metropolitan police officers who fought, who held the line, who took severe, brutal beatings, some of whom have given their lives since then. to preserve our democracy. That really is as big a part of the story as those who have turned their back on our Constitution.
Just as you're speaking, I'm thinking of Officer Ganell, who we've had on this program, who is a veteran himself, who describes what he endured and witnessed on 1/6 as more brutal than what he experienced and saw in combat. And I just want to ask you what you would say to veterans who are now facing criminal prosecution for participating. Because obviously a lot of things happened before they showed up there that day. They are responsible for their criminal acts, but they consumed a whole lot of lives from a whole lot of people. And if we're going to turn the danger around, we have to reach those people. What would you say to them?
Yeah, as a country, we're not going to address this danger and this threat by just doubling down on our politics of tribalism, by shutting people out. What I will say is I believe in redemption. I believe in second chances. I also believe in accountability. So people should and will be held accountable for violations of law and for attacks and for violent and criminal acts. That accountability will continue. But at the same time, people have to make a decision. They have to decide whether or not they're going to continue to give in to the big lie, whether they're going to continue to swallow these conspiracy theories like QAnon, the lies that they're being fed on social media and through these extremist groups, or whether they're going to try to make the right decision, whether they're going to rejoin the community, whether they're going to double down and reaffirm the oath that they once took and mean it and adhere to that oath. There is a good time to make a right decision. That time is now. It's never too late to make amends for your ways. And it's what your country needs you to do.
I hope that Officer Waldron was listening to you just now. He is, according to the January 6th committee, the author of a PowerPoint. He also apparently met with Mark Meadows, White House Chief of Staff for Donald Trump, 8 to 10 times. I worked in a White House. That's a lot of meetings, especially during a pandemic, with a White House Chief of Staff in person. Here is what my colleague Garrett Hake just learned from Congressman Adam Schiff about that PowerPoint. I'd like to play it for you and talk about it on the other side.
I think what we're seeing from these documents is a concerted effort along many different lines of effort to overturn the election. First, beginning by laying the predicate for a challenge to the legitimacy of the election when the president falsely told the country that any vote counted after Election Day was going to somehow be illegitimate. Then the frivolous litigation around the country, the president's efforts weighing in with state and local elections officials to try to get them to overturn the results. And then on January 6th, the effort to interfere with the counting of the electors. And so it's a comprehensive picture that we are assembling of all those multiple lines of effort. And, that slide deck, as well as other documents, shows just what extreme lengths people inside and outside the administration were willing to go to essentially overturn a presidential election and install Donald Trump as a president, having failed to win the election.
And just to remind our viewers, we talked about it in the last block, but that last slide in the PowerPoint had the vice president, then Mike Pence, seating Republican electors over the objections of Democrats in states where fraud occurred. There was no fraud. VP Pence rejecting the electors from states where fraud occurred, causing the election to be decided by the remaining electoral votes, and the vice president delaying the decision in order to allow for a vetting and subsequent counting of all the legal paper ballots. There was a plan on paper to overturn the will of the American voter. Are you confident we'll get to the bottom of and hold everyone accountable who was involved in that?
Well, I think we're going to get to the bottom of it. In fact, the January 6th committee continues to do great work, and we are certainly going to try to hold everybody accountable. But listening to my good friend Adam Schiff just can't help me think about a big revelation from the past couple of years, and that is I spent most of my adult life thinking that democracy was inevitable, that it's self-perpetuated, that it was just the natural condition that we would always be in. And I think one of the lessons from the last couple of years is that it's not inevitable. There is no set of documents, there are no norms, there are no customs, there are no traditions that will just have it perpetuate forever. Democracy is people. Democracy are individuals who are willing to uphold it, to abide by what democracy is, the norms and the traditions of a democratic nation. And the second that they stop upholding that, then it starts to disappear. So we have to reaffirm our commitment to democracy, because it is never more than one generation away from extinction, as that famous quote goes. So as we lead into the next couple of weeks of January 6th, on the one-year anniversary of January 6th, I'm going to be remembering that time, that somber day, the fact that we prevailed over that attempted insurrection. I'm going to be remembering the service and sacrifice of those who stopped it. But I'm also going to be reaffirming my commitment to democracy, and I call on my fellow Americans to do the same. We must reaffirm and make 2022 a year of action to reaffirm our commitment to democracy, to free and fair elections, and to those traditions and norms that have served us so well for hundreds of years.
It is Tuesday, the 14th of December of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. Always has, and it always will. Yeah, they don't call it the spice trade for nothing. Hey, looks like Mark Meadows is not only going to be put out to pasture, he might, be part of that farm program that they have in the federal lockups. Yeah, he comes from farm states, doesn't he? Yes, he does. So he ought to know something about it. You know, he always looks like he's been crying. Not that crying is bad. Men can cry, I know. But just considering the party that he belongs to, I don't think they look kindly upon that. Yet there he is. So I love one of the assessments that one of the scribes had put out yesterday that I just happened upon while I had, the TV on in the background. And that was that Mark Meadows is a known liar. That he'll just tell anybody he's standing in front of what they want to hear. Yes. I just like to cite his crying episode, his weepy episode, when he was defending himself for not being a bigot and a racist because some of his best friends were black. And here's a black friend right here. I think his name is John Lewis. One of my best black friends. I can't be racist. I know black people. And no one called him out for it. No one said, that's not an argument. If you say that some of your best friends are black, that's still setting them aside as like a special group. An identifiable special group. Not really part of your group, but special. And that's still the definition of bigotry. Okay? Racial bigotry. A lot of us learned that in grade school. Some had to wait until junior high. And looks like about 71 million or so never got the lesson at all. Because they don't want to be open-hearted. All races, all peoples, all cultures have equal footing. No, they don't want that. Which means they are not American. Yeah, they live in America, but they're not American. And I'm tired of them taking this flag. This name, even though, the guy was Italian, a map maker, he's the one that discovered that, hey, you know what, that's not India. So, anyway, I just don't like the idea that these Nazis are taking the idea of what America is and turning it around into their pathological, violent way. Yeah, I'll get it out. I just don't like it. I don't like them taking the flag. I don't like them saying that they're the true patriots, because they're not. So all those decades of let's just get so many guns out in that society that it will be total anarchy. I do notice that there is one side who is very adept and willing to use their firearms at a moment's notice. Rittenhouse is an example of that. Hey, here's a weird, I'm not really changing the subject too much, but this came across the transom too, and it was, it kind of stood out. But there's this group called Black Hammer, and they were the group of black nationalists who bought a bunch of property. Was it in Pennsylvania? I'm trying to remember where they bought it. But basically bought a bunch of property to make a big compound. Well, Black Hammer, of course, as we found out, is a misogynistic anti-Semitic. I mean, they just do not have anything nice to say about Anne Frank. Well, guess who they aligned themselves with? And who aligned themselves with Black Hammer? The Proud Boys, yes, the white nationalists, anti-Semites. So I guess anti-Semitism trumps white nationalism if you want to get something done. I mean, look how the Axis powers came together. I mean, who would have thought that Germany, with their Teutonic idea of Aryan superiority, would consider the Japanese to be on the par with them? No, they were a vehicle to get what the Nazis wanted. Because when push comes to shove, you know that the Nazis are going to have their night of the long knives, and they're going to duke it out with the samurai. Yeah. What happened? I don't think America would have been partitioned like in Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick, where the Japanese got the West Coast, the Nazis got the East Coast, and there was some sort of nebulous free America in the middle, a DMZ zone. Wasn't so demilitarized, but a buffer between the two. Nope. I think that the Nazis would have, and maybe in the Japanese in turn, would have said, okay, we got what we wanted, now we got to get rid of our that guy. Because that's how it works. That's how that imperial fascism works. I don't want a world like that. I like the idea of representative democracy. Direct democracy is great when the numbers don't get so great. Big, large, numerous. Numerous? Numbers are numerous? But representative democracy, I sort of like that. I want to continue it for a while. The idea that due process and equal protection for all. We are all, I don't know, kings in our own castle? I hate that term, too. Don't call me a lord. I was never a landlord. Property owner, but not a landlord. I don't want to lord over people. I know some people do. I never liked it. But the idea of having our own autonomy and at the same time being able to have a community in which we can fill the potholes. Make sure the drinking water is, well, drinkable, potable. Have something to do with our poop when we get rid of it, because you can't just have that laying around. Yeah. In those situations, I sort of like specialists. I like professionals. I like the people who know what the hell they're doing. Like scientists. Republican Party has moved to such a contrarian point that their attitude is that if you know anything, you don't know anything. Only those who know nothing know everything. That's where we are. We're back to the know nothing movement. Yeah. The least you know, the more you know. It's mind-boggling. And yet, some people hold on to it because it's a way for them to be able to lord over others. They're not happy having equality. They hate it. They don't want to be the same as their neighbor. They want to be better than their neighbor. And if their neighbor happens to be Jewish or black or Asian or Latin, etc., etc., etc. They don't want to be equal to that. Jeez. What do you think this is, America? Yeah, some of us kind of think it is. With all its scars, all its faults, all its mistakes, still has quite a generous and, I don't know, endearing quality. Kind of like a puppy dog, a big old lap dog, knocking things over with its tail. Doesn't mean bad, but sometimes it does. And it's sad when it does. And now we're going to have some sort of mean junkyard dog that doesn't give an F. And if you try to discipline it, it's going to bite your arm off before it goes through for your throat. All right. Well, it is a dog-eat-dog world out there, huh? We want to carry that metaphor. Why don't we carry on the more curated aspect of what West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy was supposed to be about when we first thought of what we're going to do here in this salon. Yes. A way to center ourselves in the random chaos. I know that's sort of redundant as well. The random chaos out there in what's known as the universe. Oh, which reminds me, congratulations, Miss Brazil. I think it's Miss Brazil. No. Well, somewhere in the Caribbean, could have been Brazil, but yeah, Miss Universe. Quite a stunning looking woman, too. But everybody should remember, when they say Miss Universe, they don't mean the whole universe. It's sort of like the World Series. They don't mean the whole world. So with Miss Universe, it's not the whole Miss Universe. Okay. Only the found universe, not the Miss. See where I went with that? Okay, anyway, back to the curated aspect of what we do here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Of course, at the top, yes, Trump allies continue to undermine democracy, and many members of the military played crucial roles on January 6. The Vindman brothers, true patriots, get run out of the service. And somehow Flynn's brother is still there. Still there. Well, I guess we kind of thought this was America. What the hell is happening on the rest of the menu? Speaking of which, majorities of Americans across all major religious denominations say religion is not an excuse to dodge COVID vaccines. Is not. The Supreme Court rejected an appeal from a conservative think tank over the Wisconsin governor's decision to exclude the group's writers from press briefings because, well, you know, they're not journalists. And Georgia's number 2 Republican wants to eliminate ballot drop boxes ahead of the 2022 elections because too many people use them. There must have been something wrong. People are using ballot drop boxes to drop off their ballots? No. Yeah, they're trying to keep people from voting. That's what they're about. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Germany's new foreign minister wants EU sanctions slapped on the Bosnian Serb leader for his secessionist efforts. We'll get into that. And Russia vetoed a UN Security Council resolution casting climate change as a threat to international peace and security. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly, for doing so. To the left, across the page, really, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page, and if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really helps us, because we have to pay our bills. And we always have to make sure that our machinery is upgraded. Boy, talk about planned obsolescence. I wish these kids would have thought about this better. What? You mean when we were all kids? Anyway, this planned obsolescence is getting on my nerves. And so because of that, we got to spend money to continue upgrading and maintaining the actual hardware. Make sure the software is together, and of course, every service provider wants to increase what we have to pay them. So thank you for your generosity. If you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, and if you could afford to send those funds our way once a month, it helps us pay our bills, like I said, and get that hardware maintained, and the software continued to be upgraded, and all those increasing costs. Ooh, didn't mean to kick that, but I did. Anyway, so lots of anyways here, huh? Yee. Thank you for your generosity. It's something that we have been able to do for going on 11 years now, 24/7, 365, continuous resistance broadcasting here at this little powerhouse of resistance. Nothing so far has been able to stop us. And there's been a few tragedies in the time that we've been doing what we do. A few surgeries, but nothing has knocked us off our feet. We've even had thefts of our computers right out of the studio. That was something. Boy, kind of bugged me. But nothing has stopped us. Holidays? No. Occasional power outage, hey, we're back up and running as soon as the power is back on. And that's because we have a dedication to what we do, and what we do take very seriously, because our civic duty is to make sure that, well, this representative democracy shall not be wiped from the face of the earth. We don't want that. So thank you for your generosity, and thank you for your generosity in the future when you can. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. I take care of me at Justice Putnam. Follow me there, because I do post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. You know who they are. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. You know, before we before we tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, I failed to mention a little update on the little Yorkie poodle, little Ginger. Took her to the vets yesterday. She's been having a few problems, mostly from, getting old. Some congestive heart issues. She's been on medicine and trying to clear that up a little bit, at least the fluids, so she doesn't wheeze and cough and have issues like that. And because of her particular kind of breed and a small dog like that, she has, leg issues. And she had been a three-legged dog over the weekend. Starting late Thursday. And a combination of the increasingly freezing weather here, even though she's getting quite old, she does bounce around a lot because she is a little Yorkie poo. And I think that she jumped off my mom's bed, as I mentioned, and injured her right rear leg. But she's a bit bow-legged and whatnot, and so that has a bit of an issue on how her body is constructed. Well, her bow-legged, it's how her body's constructed. Yeah. Anyway, the breed has some input on that, and these particular dogs, where the way their knees and patellas are, the groove that normally, like in our species and in dog species, that groove that holds in those cartilages and tendons tends to be fairly deep. But in this particular dog, they're not so. And her patella gets pulled out of its area. So we're going to be lining her up for surgery. But first, even though her heart and other issues that she's been dealing with are doing well, there's been something going on with her liver. So they took a blood test to see what, I don't know what they're looking for. I believe some sort of proteins. And I'll hear today what that is about, and that will determine whether little Ginger actually gets to have the surgery to correct this patella problem in her legs. And that might be a bit of a concern because he didn't get into details, but it sounded ominous. So I hope it's something that through diet and some medical science might be able to alleviate or balance out whatever these liver issues are. But such is the way of life, isn't it? Jeez. Nothing is permanent. Not one thing. Nothing. Not even granite. I wrote a haiku about that one day. Way back in the day. All right, well, I just wanted to give you an update on the animal situation. Gunner's doing pretty good. And poor Ginger, she's getting quite old, and it happens quick. Boy. Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is Out of the American Independent by Jacob Garden Schwartz. Majorities of Americans across all major religious denominations believe there is no legitimate religious basis to object to getting vaccinated against COVID-19. New public opinion research shows, yet religious objections to vaccine mandates remain a popular and effective way for vaccine-hesitant individuals to avoid the shots. It's against my religion. I can't eat that. It's against my religion. I can't read that book. It's against my religion. I don't want to brush my teeth because it's against my religion. Yeah, religion. Using religion is just a lazy excuse for, being lazy. These people. Just over 1 in 10 Americans say getting a COVID-19 vaccine would violate their religious beliefs. And that's according to a Public Religion Research Institute and the Interfaith Youth Core survey released in December, while 60% agree that there are no valid religious reasons to refuse a COVID-19 vaccine. Meanwhile, 59% of Americans told the pollster they thought too many people were using religion as an excuse. Yeah, I'd say this has been happening a lot longer than just COVID-19, but they've been doing it to avoid COVID vaccines, and just under half, 47%, of respondents went so far as to endorse eliminating all requests for COVID vaccine exemptions on religious grounds. As with most matters pertaining to the pandemic, however, Americans' opinions were split along partisan lines. One party is susceptible, in this reporter's opinion, to being completely brainwashed, and the other party has a little bit of ability to have some critical thinking and don't get brainwashed as much. A total of 20% of Republicans indicated that getting vaccinated against COVID-19 went against their personal religious beliefs, compared to just 7% of Democrats. Among those who said they got their news primarily from far-right outlets like OAN and Newsmax, known for amplifying anti-vaccine content, straight from Russia, by the way, the number with religious objections jumped up 41%. Unsurprisingly, those who refused to get vaccinated against COVID-19 expressed the strongest opinions in support of religious exemptions. 52% in that group indicated the COVID shots violated their personal religious beliefs, and just over 3 in 10 said they have already asked or plan to request a religious exemption to a vaccine requirement. It's against my religion. Oh yeah, what religion is that? I don't know. As the American Independent Foundation was among the first to report, religious exemptions stand as one of the few legal avenues for vaccine objectors to avoid vaccine mandates. When more employers and government entities began requiring vaccines, some vaccine skeptics turned to online marketplaces to purchase such exemption request letters, the investigation showed. In October, the Biden administration moved to tighten the rules relating to religious vaccine exemptions, and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission formally noting that employers could reject exemption requests if granting unvaccinated employees accommodations would place an undue burden on their workplace. Yet in recent weeks, several Republican-led states have enacted new policies making it easier for religious objectors to avoid vaccination. In Kansas, lawmakers approved a measure that requires employers to grant any request for a religious exemption to COVID-19 vaccine mandate, so long as the request was submitted in writing. Well, why not just send it to the Holy Spirit? In Utah, lawmakers went even further, enabling objectors to dodge vaccine mandates based on any sincerely held personal beliefs, even if those beliefs are not tied to a specific religious identity. Associated Press staff brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The Supreme Court has rejected an appeal from a conservative think tank over Governor Tony Evers' decision to exclude the group's writers from press briefings. The justices acted without comment yesterday, Monday, leaving in place lower court rulings that said the decision is legal. The John K. McIver Institute for Public Policy filed the lawsuit in 2019 alleging that Evers, a Democrat, violated its staffers' constitutional rights to free speech, freedom of the press, and equal access. Former Governor Scott Walker, a Republican, had joined the Institute's bid for high court review. Evers defeated Walker in 2018. Last year, a federal judge rejected the group's arguments, saying McIver can still report on Evers without being invited to his press briefings or even being on his email distribution list. The 7th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals unanimously upheld that ruling in April. Former Republican Governor Scott Walker had urged the Supreme Court to take the case, arguing that the ruling in favor of Evers allows censorship because it permits picking and choosing which reporters attend press events that have long been open to reporters but closed to the general public. The appeals court ruled that Evers' media access criteria was reasonable, and he was under no obligation to grant access for every news outlet to every news conference. McIver had argued that Evers was excluding its staffers and violating their free speech rights because they are conservatives. Evers said they were excluded because they are not principally a news-gathering operation and they are not neutral. McIver's attorney, Daniel Suhr, responded to the action by saying, Politicians should not censor the news coverage by handpicking who covers them. When asked to comment on the Supreme Court's action, Evers' spokeswoman, Britt Kudeback, referred to the governor's legal filing in the case. McIver covers legislative meetings and other events at the Capitol, as well as some Evers News conferences, but the Institute sued. After being excluded from a media briefing Evers gave for reporters on his state budget proposal in 2019. Evers wasn't present, but members of his administration provided information to reporters on embargo ahead of his budget speech to the legislature that evening. The appeals court noted that a limited number of reporters were allowed into the event. Reporters from the AP, along with the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel and Wisconsin State Journal, were among those present for that briefing. Former governors, including Walker, also limited the number of reporters and news outlets that could attend budget briefings and other events. James Oliphant from Reuters brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A leading Georgia legislator has introduced a bill that would eliminate absentee ballot drop boxes, a favored and highly used tool last November that allowed voters to safely cast ballots during the coronavirus pandemic. I should add that here in Oregon, we've only been doing it for about 30 years. Butch Miller, the number 2 Republican in Georgia's Republican-controlled Senate and a candidate for lieutenant governor in the 2022 elections, said drop boxes were a weak link in guarding against voter fraud, according to a statement released by his office. Yeah, prove it. You haven't been able to, have you? So shut the F up. Former President Donald Trump had criticized Miller, the Georgia Senate's president pro tempore, for not doing more to pursue his false voter fraud allegations, and said he will not support Miller's bid for lieutenant governor. I think old Miller there is trying to get back in Trump's good graces. Georgia will see 2 high-profile contests next year, when former Democratic gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams likely takes on Republican Governor Brian Kemp in a rematch of their 2018 battle. You know, the one that Kemp manipulated the votes and purged the voters and kept votes from being counted because he was also Secretary of State at the time, and he just kept him in the office. Yeah, talk about voter fraud. Kemp must first fend off a primary challenge from David Perdue, a Trump-backed former U.S. senator who has endorsed his false election fraud claims. You know, the guy who lost to Ossoff. Democratic U.S. Senator Raphael Warnock, the state's first African-American senator, is up for re-election. The leading Republican candidate is Herschel Walker, a former football star at the University of Georgia and in the NFL, and known wife-beater. The southern state became a flashpoint of baseless election conspiracy theories after President Joe Biden's upset victory over Trump last November. Upset? I would say it was a complete trouncing, but, you know, hey. Kemp and the state's Republican Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, had insisted no widespread fraud occurred, none that they had done themselves, of course. Democrats narrowly won 2 U.S. Senate seats in the state that gave them majority control of that chamber. Warnock, who won one of them in a special runoff for the final 2 years of a term after Republican Johnny Isakson resigned for health reasons. Earlier this year, the Georgia legislature passed a voting reform measure that sharply limited the number of drop boxes, disproportionately affecting Democratic-leaning urban counties with significant black populations that relied on the boxes during the pandemic. The law also shortened the time for requesting an absentee ballot. The U.S. Justice Department sued the state in June, alleging that several provisions in the bill were adopted with the purpose of suppressing the right to vote on account of race. In addition, the General Assembly passed a series of county-specific bills that handed greater control of local election boards to Republican county commissions, pushing out some outspoken black advocates in the process. Feature, not a bug. Okay, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
This is 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. In the early 1600s, competition to settle North America was heating up between the major European powers. Spain, France, and the Netherlands each claimed territory in what would eventually become the United States. England had tried and failed to establish a colony called Roanoke in 1587 on an island in what is today North Carolina. It was a tiny colony of only 117 people. The colony disappeared sometime between 1587 and 1590, when ships bringing supplies arrived and sailors discovered that the colonists had vanished. The first permanent English settlement in North America was in Jamestown, Virginia, which was first founded in 1607 by the Virginia Company. England wanted its colonies in North America to be profitable, so it offered incentives for settlement. 2 of these were royal proprietorships and joint stock companies. 11 of the 13 British colonies were royal proprietorships. The Jamestown settlement was founded by the Virginia Company, which was a joint stock company that operated under a charter from King James I. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
I'm Rick Smith,
and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1852. That was the day socialist leader Daniel de Leon was born in Curacao to Dutch Jewish parents. As a young man, he traveled Europe. He settled in New York City and earned a law degree from Columbia University in 1878. De Leon joined the Socialist Labor Party in 1890 and became the editor of its newspaper, The People. His book, Socialist Landmarks, consisting of a series of lectures, became wildly popular. These lectures included Reform or Revolution, What Means This Strike, The Burning Question of Trade Unionism, and Socialist Reconstruction of Society. De Leon warned of reforms under capitalism as illusory. He argued for revolutionary socialism and soon assumed leadership of the Socialist Labor Party. As a former member of the Knights of Labor, he was critical of the American labor movement, often referring to the AFL as the American separation of labor for its business unionism and refusal to organize any but the most highly skilled white craft workers. De Leon also took a strong stand against racism in the socialist movement, stating, quote, "Why should a truly socialist organization of whites not take in Negro members, but organize these in separate bodies? On account of outside prejudice, then the body is not truly socialist." De Leon was among the socialist leaders at the founding 1905 Conference of the Industrial Workers of the World. By 1908, he and others looked to effect social change through the Socialist Party and existing trade union movement. This put them at odds with the direct action perspective of the IWW. Many left the IWW at this point, including De Leon and socialist leader Eugene V. Debs. When he died in 1914, more than 30,000 turned out for his funeral. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 34 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting only a high of 36. Considerable drop-off in temperature from what we've experienced recently. Cloudy early with peaks of sunshine expected late. Winds will be light and variable. We had quite a bit of rain yesterday, almost an inch, and not much overnight. Cloudy skies with late-night snow showers tonight. Lows around 30 or less. Winds light and variable. And looks like we might get something over an inch of snow overnight. And then tomorrow, highs around 37, a mix of rain and snow in the morning, turning to mostly rain in the afternoon. Highs around 37, winds light and variable, and snow should accumulate over an inch. The coronavirus numbers have not been updated from over the weekend, so we'll update those tomorrow, possibly when they get updated today. Pollen is rated as none outside the window here in Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is good at 28 parts per million. We'll see how long that lasts with the wood burning. And the daytime UV index is low at level 2. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.87 inches. Visibility is down to 5 miles and relative humidity is at 97%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 55 and cloudy. Paris, or known there as Paris, is 46 and cloudy. Rome, or otherwise known as Roma, is 59 degrees and sunny. Kyiv is 33 and cloudy. Kabul, remember Kabul? They're 30 degrees and clear. Hong Kong is 65 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 42 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 65 and clear. San Francisco, California is 42 and mostly cloudy and expecting a river of rain. And New York is a chilly, crisp 48 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Anonymous staff at the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The European Union should slap sanction on Bosnian Serb leader Milorad Dodik for his efforts to get Serb-dominated areas in Bosnia to secede from the Balkan country, Germany's new foreign minister said yesterday, Monday. Annalena Baerbock, who took office last week, told reporters in Brussels that the situation in Bosnia-Herzegovina was worrying and the Bosnian Serb secession attempts were unacceptable. For me personally, this means that the existing sanctions regime should now also be used against Mr. Dodik, Baerbock said after a meeting with EU foreign ministers where she pressed for the measures to be imposed. Her comments followed a vote on Friday by the Bosnian Serb parliament to launch a series of steps that could weaken war-ravaged Bosnia's central authority. The U.S. has already placed a travel ban and assets freeze on Dodik and threatened more sanctions in case Bosnian Serbs further weaken Bosnia's central institutions. The 1992-1995 Bosnian War left more than 100,000 people dead and millions homeless during the worst bloodshed in Europe since World War II. It started after Bosnian Serbs, with the help of the Serb-led Yugoslav army, tried to create ethnically pure territories in Bosnia with the aim of joining Serbia.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Jennifer Peltz of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Russia yesterday, Monday, vetoed a first-of-its-kind UN Security Council resolution casting climate change as a threat to international peace and security, a vote that sank a years-long effort to make global warming a more central consideration for the UN's most powerful body. Spearheaded by Ireland and Niger, the proposal called for incorporating information on the security implications of climate change into the Council's strategies for managing conflicts and into peacekeeping operations and political missions, at least sometimes. The measure also asked the UN Secretary-General to make climate-related security risk a central component of conflict prevention efforts and a report on how to address those risks in specific hotspots. The Council has occasionally discussed the security implications of climate change since 2007, and the wider General Assembly pronounced itself deeply concerned about the issue in 2009. The Council has passed resolutions that mention destabilizing efforts of warming in specific places, such as various African countries and Iraq, but Monday's resolution would have been the first devoted to climate-related security danger as an issue of its own. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.